Application forms for sharing accommodations must be completed 2 months in advance.
Testing 1 2 3. When a male African savanna elephant folds his ears while simultaneously waving them, he is ready for a fight. When a female folds her ears and accompanies the action with an ear flap, that means she is also issuing a serious threat. But when elephants come together and fold their ears, the animals are expressing a warm greeting. Today's global food system is responsible for around a third of greenhouse gas emissions, and meat production is one of the biggest culprits. Despite this environmental impact, meat eating is on the rise. Plant-based and lab-grown alternatives can convert carnivores away from conventional meat and reduce emissions. To bridge gaps between teams, one tactic is to set aside more of the office to showcase the work of each department so that people who never encounter each other on Zoom can see examples of what their colleagues do. Another option is to ply everyone with drink, expect more space to be set aside for socializing and events. After the coldest night in South Florida in a decade, lizards were dropping out of palm trees, landing legs up. The scientists who raced to investigate the fallen reptiles have now found that, despite such grassless falls, some of these tropical cold-blooded creatures are actually more resilient to cold than previously thought. Flooding is already the most common natural disasters in the United States, occurring in every state and killing more people each year than hurricanes, tornadoes, or lightning. As warming drives sea levels higher and intensifies hurricanes, more residents should expect to deal with flooding. Cotton plants native to Mexico may all look the same, unkept and untamed bushes with flowers that shift from pale yellow to violet as pollinators visit them. But genes from genetically modified cotton crops have made some of these native plants fundamentally different, changing their biology and the way they interact with insects.
The hotel has a small lounge and a breakfast room on the ground floor.
The hotel has a small lounge and breakfast room in the ground floor.
The decisions we take now may influence the course of events in the future.
The decision we take now may influence the course of events in the future.
Our country has registered a protest over foreign intervention.
Our country has raised protest against foreign interventions.
When the rain came down, the crowd started to disperse.
When the rain came down, the crowd started to disperse.
The law will compel employers to provide health insurance.
The law will compel insurance to provide health insurance.
During a successful business career, she accumulated a great amount of wealth.
During successful business career, she accumulated a great wealth of amount.
The small island's economy is largely dependent upon tourism.
The small island economy is largely dependent upon tourism.
Children often depend on their parents for food and clothing.
Children often depend on their parents for food and clothing.
Their house is on a hill which overlooks the beautiful sea.
Their houses are in the hill which overlook the beautiful of sea.
The man has suffered from mental disorders and drug use for years.
The man had suffered from mental disorder and drug use for the year. The bar graph represents sales and expenses in different months from January to June. The y-axis represents the amounts of sales and expenses made over the different months. Firstly, the highest number of sales was made on month June, which was more than 120,000 US dollar, and the lowest amount of sales was made on the month January, which is less than $80,000. On the other hand, the highest expenses was made on June, which is around $80,000, and the lowest expenses was made on January with less than $20,000. Overall, this graph represents sales and expenses. The image gives information about the life cycle of butterfly. There are 4 steps in the life cycle of a butterfly. The first step is the formation of egg. Once the egg is formed, the caterpillar is formed, which is a bit larger in size. After that, the cherry styles is formed. This is the third step in the formation of butterfly. After that, finally, adult butterfly is formed, which is grown and looks bigger in size. And again, this adult butterfly lays egg, and the life cycle of butterflies keep repeating. In this way, there are 4 steps in the life cycle of butterfly to complete. The line graph represents student and teacher growth rates over the years. The x-axis represents year from 2010 to 2020, and the y-axis represents student growth rate in percentage and teacher growth rates in percentage. The highest number of student growth rate was seen in the year 2014 and 2020, which is more than 4.5 percentage, while the lowest was seen in the year 2016 and 2010, which was around 2.5%. The highest number of teacher growth rate was seen in 2017 and 2012, being more than 4.5 percentage, and the less was in the year 2012. The pie chart represents TV program types viewership distributions in different categories like documentary, news, sports, drama, and comedy. The highest number of TV program was for news, which is 25%, and the lowest program was seen in documentary, about 10%. Moreover, sports is at 15%, and drama being the highest at 30%. Overall, the pie chart represents TV program types viewership distributions in different categories such as comedy being 20% and documentary being listed at 10%. The map gives information about the climate region of Australia. Warm temperate moist is seen in the eastern side of Australia in Melbourne, Sydney and the Brisbane, while the warm temperate dry climate is seen in the southern part of the Australia from east to west. Moreover, the cool temperate moist is seen in the large part of the Australia. On the other hand, the tropical dry climate is almost the 90% of the total Australia is covered by this type of climate. On the other hand, tropical moist scene is in the northern part of the Australia like Darwin and the Cairns City. Overall, map shows about the climatic region of Australia.
Now, typically, when we think about business, we use what I call mechanical thinking. We set goals, we analyze problems, we construct and we adhere to plans, and more than anything else, we stress efficiency and short-term performance. And don't get me wrong, this is a splendidly practical and effective way of addressing relatively simple challenges in relatively stable environments. It's the way that Bob, and probably many of us, myself included, process most business problems we're faced with every day. In fact, it was a pretty good mental model for business overall until about the mid-1980s, when the conjunction of globalization and a revolution in technology and telecommunications made business far more dynamic and unpredictable. But what about those more dynamic and unpredictable situations that we now increasingly face? I think in addition to the mechanical thinking, we now need to master the art of biological thinking, as embodied by our 6 principles. In other words, we need to think more modestly and subtly about when and how we can shape, rather than control, unpredictable and complex situations.
The lecture was mainly about how we can implement mechanical thinking in the business model. Firstly, the speaker mentioned how to set goals and then take actions to grow the business. He further discussed addressing challenges and the business problems that are facing in the everyday business issue. Moreover, he presented globalization and revolution of technology and their effects in the business technology. Additionally, he highlighted make businesses dynamic, and also globalization and technology make business dynamic. Towards the end, the speaker said mastering the art of biological thinking. Overall, the lecture concluded about when and how to control our thinking to grow the business.
Walls and fences are often built with the intention of security. Security from another group of people, from crime, from illegal trades. But walls and fences only provide us with a feeling of security, which is different from real security. Even though they might make us feel safe, the structures themselves can't protect us. Instead, they do something else. They separate. They create an us and a them. They establish an enemy. Walls make us build a second wall in our head, a mental wall. And those mental walls slowly make us lose sight of all the things we have in common with the people on the other side. The other way around, mental walls can grow so strong that they encourage us to build, keep, or strengthen physical walls. Physical and mental walls are closely interlinked, and one almost always comes with the other. It's a constant cycle. Physical walls empower mental walls, and mental walls empower physical walls, until at one point, one part falls away, and the cycle is disrupted.
The lecture was mainly about security in illegal trades. Firstly, the speaker mentioned feeling of security and the real security. He further discussed establishing the enemy and the mental walls. He also talked about 2 types of wall, that is called mental wall and the physical wall. If the one category is false, then both are become imbalanced. Towards the end, the speaker said physical and mental walls are interrelated, so they depend upon each other. And also, one part falls, then cycle is disrupted. Overall, the lecture concluded about security in illegal trades and establishing the enemy, and how mental wall helps to make the decisions in the people's life.
What do we call a vehicle that travels in space?
Rocket, spacecraft.
What do we call a vehicle that travels underground in a city?
Train, buses, tramp, rail, tramp.
How many circles are there on the Olympic flag?
5, 7, 5, 7, 9, 6, 8, 4.
Where did the first industrial revolution happen?
Europe, France, England, Britain, America, Europe, Germany.
Which one is the unit for length, kilogram, decimeter, or hectare?
Decimeter, meter, hectare.
3 students are debating the value of required physical education courses.
I can't believe we're forced to take 2 semesters of PE. I tried badminton last term, and it was so humiliating. I have 0 coordination. The coach kept correcting my posture in front of everyone. I'd rather use that time for my major courses instead of wasting afternoons running around a court.
Actually, I think PE requirements are pretty valuable. Before college, I never exercised regularly. Now, because it's mandatory, I've discovered I actually enjoy swimming. It's a great stress reliever from all the academic pressure. Plus, it gets me away from my desk and screens for a few hours each week.
That's fine for you, but not everyone enjoys competitive activities. I have asthma and always struggle to pass the fitness tests. Last semester I got docked points because I couldn't complete the running requirement. It's unfair to judge everyone by the same physical standards when we have different abilities and health conditions.
Exactly, and the grading is so subjective. Why should my GPA suffer because I'm not athletic? I'm here to get an education, not train for the Olympics. The time spent changing clothes, showering, and traveling to the sports complex adds over 3 hours to my weekly schedule, time I could use studying.
I understand your concerns, but that's missing the bigger picture. We sit in classrooms and libraries all day. PE forces us to maintain some physical activity, which actually improves concentration and sleep quality. I've noticed I focus better on readings after some exercise. And it's not about being the best. It's about participation and basic health awareness.
But why make it graded then? If it's about health benefits, it should be pass/fail without affecting our transcripts. I'd be less opposed if it wasn't impacting my academic standing. The current system causes unnecessary anxiety for those of us who aren't naturally sporty.
Same here. At least make it optional, or offer more alternatives like yoga or walking clubs that accommodate different fitness levels. The one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work.
I agree there should be more options, but I still think some physical activity requirement is important. Many students would never exercise otherwise. Maybe they could expand the choices to include less intensive activities.
I'd support that compromise. If they offered activities like hiking or dance without the competitive element, I might actually enjoy it. But the current system needs reform. It's too rigid and stressful for non-athletes.
The discussion was mainly about the importance of physical activity and exercise in the education and the students' daily life. There were 3 speakers in the discussion. The first speaker discussed about zero coordination and the instructor always correct his posture in front of the whole class. He further mentioned time spent on shower and travel is taking a lot of time that can be utilized in the study. Moreover, he presented importance of yoga and walking clubs in the students' physical ability. After that, the second speaker focused on before college never exercise, but now he feel very nice. He sit in a classroom and the library to read the books, and also physical activity improves his concentration and studies. This speaker also talked about basic health and awarenesses, and there is requirements for the expanded choice for the students to grow their mental and physical ability. The third speaker agreed with what was said. He shared information of having asthma and had to pass the physical test, and he also provided details about every student has different ability and they have got health conduct. So this speaker also provided details on academic standard and students are having anxiety. Towards the end, they focus on hiking, dance class, and current system needs the reform as well. Overall, the discussion concluded about the exercise and its benefits in the student life.
Three students are debating the pros and cons of open book exams. Under the shade of an old oak tree on the quad, their textbooks spread out on the grass between them.
I absolutely dread open book exams. Just because we can use our notes doesn't mean they're easier. During last Tuesday's history midterm, I spent so much time flipping through my binder looking for specific dates that I barely finished in time. I actually think I would have done better with a traditional closed book test where I just relied on what I'd memorized.
Actually, I find open book format much more realistic. In the real world, we'll always have access to information. What matters is knowing how to find and apply it quickly. The business case study exam last month was perfect. I could focus on analyzing the situation rather than worrying about memorizing every detail. It tests our understanding, not just our memory.
But that's missing the point. The pressure is different. Since professors know we have our materials, they make the questions much more detailed and tricky. I spent the entire chemistry exam cross-referencing 3 different chapters and still left feeling unsure about my answers. At least with traditional exams, the expectations are clear.
Exactly. And there's this false sense of security. I thought I was prepared because I had organized notes, but when I actually needed to find specific information, I panicked. My friend even brought too many materials and wasted precious time sorting through them. Traditional exams might be stressful, but they're straightforward.
I understand the anxiety, but that's why we need to develop different skills. Learning how to organize information for quick access is valuable itself. I color code my notes and create detailed indexes, specifically for open book tests. Plus, it reduces so much pre-exam stress. No more cramming everything into my head the night before.
That system might work for you, but not everyone learns the same way. I actually retain information better when I know I need to memorize it. Last semester's open book psychology exam was my lowest score because I underestimated how much I needed to know by heart.
Same here. Maybe a combination would work best. Some closed book sections for core concepts, plus open book sections for application questions. That way we get to demonstrate both knowledge and skills.
That's not a bad compromise, though I'd still prefer a fully open book. It reflects how we actually solve problems in modern workplaces. The ability to find and use information efficiently is more relevant than pure memorization these days.
I suppose hybrid could work, but I still believe there's value in traditional exams. Having information readily available in your memory is different than looking it up.
The discussion was mainly about the benefits and drawback of open book exam. There were 3 speakers in the discussion. The first speaker mentioned that we can use the notes for the history and for the midterm examination, but he preferred the traditional closed book exams because he find that there is a lack of sense of security, and he panicked during the exam because it wasted his time to sort the answers because there are many things are written in the notes. Moreover, this speaker presented combination of work would be best. There will be utilization of knowledge and skills. After that, the second speaker focused on how to find and apply quickly and analyzing. Also, she shared information that developing skills help to organize the information, and using the color code and the index can helps to find the detailed information from the notes. Also, taking notes helps to reduce the stress. So this speaker prefer fully open book exam. On the other hand, the third speaker agreed with first speaker, and he doesn't like open exam more than compared to the closed book exam. This speaker said professor make question tricky after knowing that this is an open book exam, and also the chapter 3 in the chemistry chapter he struggled in the examination. Also, he shared information on retaining better with memorization instead of just looking in the notes. Overall, the lecture concluded about there should be hybrid type of exam so that student can develop their application and theory based knowledge.
You're planning a weekend getaway with friends, and they're discussing the activities they want to do. However, you realize some of the suggestions might not be feasible due to time constraints or budget limitations. You need to gently guide the conversation towards more realistic options without dampening the excitement. What would you say to your friends?
Dear friends, firstly, I would like to inform you that I'm planning a weekend getaway with my friends, and they are discussing the activities they want to do. Secondly, I realized some of the suggestions might not be feasible due to the time constraints or budget limitations. Therefore, I need to gently guide the conversation towards more realistic options without demanding the excitement. I really suggest my friend to not to demand more things because I have the limitations in the budget and I have my own things to fulfill. I really hope that you will understand this situation and I'm looking forward to a positive outcome.
You manage a communal garden, and during your latest visit, you notice several plants have been trampled, and gardening tools are scattered everywhere. You need to address the community to encourage care and shared responsibility for the garden's upkeep. What would you say to the community members?
Dear community members, I hope you are well. Today I would like to inform you that I managed a communal garden during my last visit. Secondly, I noticed that several plants have been trampled and gardening tools are scattered everywhere. Therefore, I need to address the community to encourage care and shared responsibility for the garden's upkeep. I really hope that you will understand this situation and take a positive outcome to prevent the garden and make our surrounding looks better, and I really hope that you will understand my concern.
The battle for climate change will be won or lost in cities.
Cities play an outsized role in climate change, consuming around 75% of the world's energy and producing more than 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. But they can also be part of the solution, creating meaningful impact while being small and nimble enough to avoid the bureaucracy of global politics.
In fact, many have already started work.
2022 marked some of the most extreme weather events on record, with wildfires and droughts ravaging parts of Europe, the US, and Africa, while Asia battled disastrous flooding and monsoon rains. And experts warn it's just the beginning.
What we calculated and what we knew as a 1 in 10 years event is now becoming 1 in 5 years. So the frequency is increasing.
Our cities are at the forefront of those shifts. Today, more than half of the world's population live in urban areas, a figure that's set to rise to 68% by 2050. This migration pattern is driven partly by the climate crisis, which, in turn, creates new risks and stress for urban infrastructures.
I'd like to start this lecture on the use of technology in education by talking about a subject that's probably close to all your hearts, which is the way that student work is graded. And specifically, I want to talk to you about some of the ways written assignments or essays are marked. Well, as you all know, traditionally writing done by a student is checked, marked and graded by a teacher, a tutor, or, in some situations, an examiner. In other words, a real person. Software to mark essays has been in development for some time, and grading software on computers is already used by some universities to mark exams, but it is still viewed with suspicion by some. How can a computer mark an essay, they ask? Well, a recent study compared the human ability to give grades to student essays to the ability of a computer to do the same job. In the study, over 16,000 essays were used. These essays had already been previously marked by at least one trained human grader. The study showed that the essay marks given by the computer software were almost the same as those from human graders, which I think you'll agree is a controversial result, and it's likely to make us as teachers re-evaluate how we grade written work.
We constantly negotiate at work. We negotiate for higher pay, promotions, vacations, and even greater autonomy. In fact, every day we negotiate just to get our job done and to secure resources for ourselves and our teams. And yet, when we go in with the wrong mindset, with our fists up, ready to fight, we aren't as successful. You know why? Because negotiation is not about dominating. It's about crafting a relationship, and relationships thrive when we find ways to give and to take and move together in unison. And to do that, you have to be well prepared. First, do your research. Figure out whether what you're asking for is realistic. What is your aspiration? What do you want? And what will make you walk away from the table? This might seem obvious, but too many people don't think it through.
This week, we're going to be continuing our discussion of women in society. Last week, we looked at a number of issues relating to women in education. If you remember, we discussed women both at school and at university. Today, we're going to be considering the roles that women play in the workplace. Again, we'll start by taking a historical perspective, and inevitably you'll find that many of the same events that impacted on women in education also had a major influence on their working lives. In the second half of the lecture, I'll concentrate on the situation in Europe today, and I'll invite you to suggest how you think things are likely to develop over the next decade. Okay, so let's get started.
UNICEF is warning that schools in Haiti are increasingly at the mercy of gangs, with children becoming targets of robbery or ransom. The agency said Tuesday at least 7 schools in the capital of Port-au-Prince have been forced to pay unidentified gangs in exchange for security in the past 2 months, and that additional institutions have also been threatened. The warning comes days after authorities said gang members killed a university professor they had recently abducted. In addition, U.S. and Haitian authorities are still trying to secure the release of 17 missionaries from a U.S. religious organization who were kidnapped on October 16th near the capital.
Urban development is the first thing I wanted to talk about here in Perth. Urban development is going on at a great pace, and the standard approach here in Western Australia is for suburban development to happen at the outer edges of the city. You have suburbs slowly spreading out into areas that are cleared, and this is eating into both areas of native bushland and land that used to be used for farming, for agricultural purposes. The debate here is that, on one side, there's the idea that we need more housing. We have a housing shortage in Western Australia, and suburban expansion is essential. Suburban expansion on the edges of the city is cheaper and easier to do than building more homes within the city, even though it's recognised it creates lots of problems with infrastructure and so on. On the other side of the debate, people say that urban sprawl is destroying bush, and consequently the natural wildlife that exists there, and that it's too easy for developers to ignore these facts.
To enjoy a harmonious union with someone, we should ensure that we have plenty of sources of excitement, reassurance and stimulation outside of them. When we hit problems, we should be able to lean on other supports. The demand that another person compensate us for all that's alarming, wearing or deficient in our lives is a mechanism for systematically destroying any relationship. Our conflicts and disappointments will at once feel more manageable when we stop asking our partner to function always as our long-lost other half. The more we can survive without a relationship, the greater will be that relationship's chances of survival and fulfillment. We will truly give love a chance when we stop believing that it can single-handedly save us.
Listen to a discussion in a business class.
The computerized workplace can be hazardous to your health if you don't take preventative measures. Today, we'll go over what some of these hazards are, and more importantly, what can be done about them. One major complaint, maybe the biggest complaint, of people who spend time at the computer is eye strain. To help ease the strain on the eyes, the computer screen should be about 2 feet from your eyes. The entire screen should be in focus. The brightness and contrast should be adjusted for best readability. A good way to relieve eye strain is to look away from the screen frequently. Focus your eyes on objects that are far away, like something outside, the building across the street or the tree in the parking lot.
But what if your office doesn't have a window? I mean, I've worked in lots of places where there's no window.
Then in that case, you need to get up and walk around. You should never sit for more than 30 minutes at a time anyway. This is important for the rest of your body as well, namely your back. Neck and back pain are a big problem for computer people. Always make sure your screen, keyboard, and chair are at the right height for you.
How would you define reasonable as it is used in law? For example, you are allowed to use reasonable force when defending yourself. It seems to depend on how serious the situation was, whether it was possible to resolve it by peaceful means, whether you were ready to try those means, and, finally, the relative strengths of those involved. Now, most men know, and they've probably grasped this from their earliest years in the school playground, that when it comes to blows, fights don't stop until one of you is in no shape to do any damage to the other. The criteria mentioned seem a bit fuzzy to me. How can you convince a jury you were ready to try and talk your way out of it when the other person would have none of it? And besides, he was quick to land the first punch. Also, you can strike the first blow and still plead self-defense. Of course, you again have the problem of convincing people that the threat was so great that you had no alternative apart from getting beaten up yourself. Reacting calmly and rationally to a perceived threat is not easy to do.
Nature's instruments for survival can be a godsend until they begin to affect us in destructive ways. Someone's negative characteristics can cloud their favorable traits to such an extent that we cannot see the positive anymore. In our biased minds, this person has become purely evil. It's pretty difficult not to feel repulsed by someone who doesn't have any positive traits, let alone forgive them. So we might want to look beyond the vast spectre of negativity and see that the people we resent are also carrying good within them, and that it's human to possess both evil and good.
Here's one way bats might get their next meal: by eavesdropping on flies having sex. Bats eat a lot of seemingly undetectable flies. To find out how the winged mammals find the insects, researchers set up a video camera inside a cowshed that was home to a bat colony and lots of bugs. The video showed that bats rely on their echolocation skills to detect flies at a specific time, when they're engaged in rather noisy sex. Flies are usually quiet in bat territory and sit on cluttered ceilings in caves, where background noise masks the echoes from their movement. But when flies are feeling frisky, males can't help but flutter their wings, emitting a burst of click sounds that the bats pick up on. During more than 1,000 sexual encounters caught in the act on video, 5% of the insects were caught in the act by bats. The research is published in the journal Current Biology. The study shows that ignorance can be safer than carnal knowledge when predators are on the prowl.
When it comes to lizard sex, size does matter, but not in the way you might think. Because in the June 4th online issue of the journal Current Biology, scientists say that for at least one type of lizards, larger eggs are more likely to make girls, while smaller eggs yield boys. For many animals, the sex of an individual is dictated solely by its chromosomes, but for small alpine lizards, gender isn't so cut and dried. The scientists had earlier found that nest temperature can influence the sex of lizard hatchlings. Cooler nests turn out more boys, no matter what their chromosomes say. At the same time, the researchers noticed that larger eggs seem to make more daughters, but they wanted to put their observation to the test. So they took big eggs and removed some yolk, and voila, they made males. Adding yolk to a little egg was a recipe for a female. This egg size manipulation might allow moms to balance their babies' sexes, when a chilly nest would otherwise produce mostly sons. Because when it comes to alpine lizards, sex determination all comes down to a practical yolk.
The professor will be teaching history and sociology next term. He taught literature for several years before becoming a writer. All of our centers would provide information on technology and training.
Hello guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I will post the score in my thumbnail. So yeah, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe the channel. Thank you.